A millionaire took a homeless woman to his ex-girlfriend's wedding, but what she did when she arrived left everyone open-mouthed. Before the story begins, comment in the comments which city you're watching us from. A good story, everyone. Let's get started. Adam Scott has always been a man used to getting everything he wants. Money, power, status. Nothing was ever denied him. He was the owner of an incalculable fortune, and for many, an example of success. However, behind the impeccable suit and the cold stare, there was a man who couldn't forget the hurts of the past. And one of those hurts had a first and last name, Evelyn Lopez. Their relationship had been intense, but it had ended bitterly. Evelyn not only left him, but humiliated him by leaving him for a rival businessman, someone who, at the time, was on the rise, but would never reach Adam's level. The wound was deep, and even years later he hadn't forgotten. So when a golden envelope landed on his desk, bearing a shiny invitation in sophisticated lettering, something inside him flipped. "Mr. Adam Scott, we have the honor of inviting you to the wedding of Evelyn Lopez and Alejandro Montiel. The ceremony will take place at the Grand Royal Hotel, followed by an exclusive dinner for special guests." Adam ran his eyes over the invitation once, twice, feeling his blood boil. The arrogant tone of the message seemed like a direct provocation, as if Evelyn wanted to rub his happiness in his face, to show that she had moved on without him. He dropped the invitation on the mahogany table and leaned back in the leather armchair. A cynical smile appeared on his face. "So, you want to show me how happy you are, Evelyn?" he thought to himself. "Let's see who gets the last word." That evening, sipping his favorite whiskey in front of the fireplace in his mansion, Adam came up with a plan. Not only would he attend the wedding, but he would get there with an escort who would make everyone there swallow. He wanted to make an impact. He wanted to see the shock on Evelyn's face. And more than anything, he wanted her to regret leaving him. "If it's a game you want to play, then I'll win," he muttered, turning the glass over and feeling the hot liquid burn his throat. He already knew exactly how he was going to make that wedding unforgettable. The next morning, Adam set off in his luxury car through the city streets, with a single goal in mind: to find someone who could shock high society. Someone unexpected. Someone who would make an impact. He didn't simply want a stunning model or a famous actress. That would be too predictable. He needed something that no one would ever imagine. As he drove through the busy streets of the center, he observed the people hurrying to work, the tourists taking photos, and those forgotten by society. In an alley next to a sophisticated cafe, his eyes fell on a figure unlike any other. It was a woman sitting on a cardboard box, leaning against the wall of a building. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes dirty and worn, but her posture was not that of someone defeated. On the contrary, she stood erect, watching the movement with a sharp, almost defiant gaze. Next to her, an executive in a suit walked past with a cup of coffee in his hand. Without even looking at the woman, he threw a few coins at her. She rolled her eyes and took the coins, weighing them in her palm. "Wow, how generous. I think I can buy a private island now," she muttered sarcastically, throwing the coins back on the ground. Adam smiled. That woman was different. He got out of the car and approached her, his hands in the pockets of his expensive jacket. "Do you always treat people who give you handouts like that?" The woman looked up, analyzing him suspiciously. Her eyes were a deep brown, intelligent and penetrating. "It depends. Did you come to give me handouts, or did you come to look at me like I was a zoo attraction?" Adam let out a low laugh. "Neither. Actually, I came to make you an offer." She arched an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Adam bent down slightly, reducing the distance between them. "I need an escort for an important event. In return, I offer money, new clothes, and a place to get ready." The woman laughed, a short, debauched laugh. "Let me get this straight. You want to turn a beggar woman into your luxury escort? Is that it?" Adam smiled. "Exactly." She remained silent for a few seconds, assessing him. Then she tilted her head and said, "That sounds like something out of a bad movie, but I love a challenge." Adam held out his hand. "Your name?" She shook his hand without hesitation. "Isabella." "All right, Isabella. You've got a few hours to leave the whole city stunned." Isabella looked at Adam with an enigmatic smile, as if she had seen it all before, as if the world wasn't as surprising as he thought. She knew what was going on. He thought she was just a defeated woman, a street beggar he could mold into whatever he wanted. But Isabella wasn't like that. She had a quiet strength, a confidence that went beyond dirty clothes and days spent in the cold. The way he looked at her, as if she were a piece on the board of a game he had mastered, made her laugh inside. He didn't know it yet, but she was more in control of the situation than he thought. "You have some idea of how this is all going to work out, don't you?" he asked, trying to look imposing as she stood up from the cardboard box, her gaze still, penetrating. Isabella stretched her back, pulled out a lock of her hair, and curled it between her fingers. "I know more than you think," she replied with a hint of sarcasm, "but I'm willing to see how far this crazy plan of yours goes. Let's see what you have to offer." Adam didn't expect this answer. He expected a look of doubt, hesitation, maybe even a little fear. But what he found instead was a woman with unshakable confidence who didn't seem to care that she was in a seemingly unfavorable situation. Something in her attitude made him think that she had much more to offer than he had imagined. It intrigued him. "I like your spirit," he said, trying to hide the surprise in his voice. "It'll be interesting to see how far you go with it." Isabella shrugged, with the smile of someone who had lived and seen too much. "You'll be surprised. I always go all the way. And believe me, it'll be more fun than you think." Adam watched her for a moment, analyzing every movement, every word. There was something there, something he couldn't understand, but which attracted him. He who had always been in control of everything now found himself in front of a woman who didn't seem to follow the rules. It challenged him, and, as always, he loved a good challenge. "All right then," he said more to himself than to her. "I'll turn you. Let's see what you can do in my world." Isabella didn't answer straight away. Instead, she looked around, observing the city and all its secrets. "Transformation? That will be interesting. But in the end, you'll be the one who really transforms," she murmured, almost like a promise. Adam didn't know it, but the seeds of his discomfort were beginning to be planted at that moment. He believed he was in control, but Isabella was a woman of mysteries and secrets, and what she would do with that opportunity was far from predictable. He just didn't know that his life would never be the same after that encounter. With a smile on her face, Isabella followed Adam to the car, ready to face what was to come. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: this experience would be much more than he had imagined. Adam drove the car steadily, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking about everything that could go wrong. He knew that Isabella's transformation would not be easy. This woman, with her sarcasm and defiant attitude, would not be molded by any kind of luxury process. But at the same time, he was curious, almost excited by the idea of seeing her transform before his eyes. What he didn't know was that Isabella didn't need to make a great effort to impress. She already had something that many considered intangible: a natural elegance. They arrived at the luxury beauty salon, one of the most renowned in the city, with polished marble floors and a decor that exuded sophistication. When they entered, heads turned. The receptionists exchanged suspicious glances, trying to understand the contrast between the impeccable surroundings and the woman who was now there, dressed in worn and dirty clothes. Adam could see the judgmental expressions on some of the employees' faces, but he didn't care. Not yet. He was determined to make Isabella the centerpiece of the evening, a woman everyone would talk about. "Here we are," Adam said, looking at Isabella, who still had the same defiant look. "Now let's take the first step." Isabella looked around with an expression almost of indifference. "Do you think this place will make me be someone I'm not?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't need a luxury salon to know who I am." Adam smiled, but this time not arrogantly. He knew she was right, but he wanted to see how far she would go. "I know that," he replied in a softer tone. "But the world doesn't work the way you think it does, Isabella. Sometimes looks can be the key to what you want. Let's see where this takes you." Without another word, Isabella was led to the hairdressing chair. The salon was packed with experts, all eager to get to work on her transformation. As the professionals began to work on her messy hair, the street girl everyone had seen moments before was slowly transforming. As the process progressed, Isabella began to relax. She allowed the professionals to cut and style her hair, changing her tone of indifference to silent acceptance. With each new touch, a trace of her natural beauty became more evident. Her hair, once unruly, now flowed softly in waves, giving her an air of unexpected sophistication. Her skin, previously marked by life on the streets, now glowed with the treatments and delicate touches of expert hands. She studied her reflection in the mirror, without surprise. It wasn't a big transformation. It was just a revelation. She had always known that beneath the layers of dirt and distrust there was something beautiful, something that was waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged. When the process was complete, Isabella stood up from her chair. The salon staff gasped. What they saw now was not just a well-groomed woman. She was a woman with presence, with power. Her gaze was steady but no longer defiant. She was confident but not arrogant. This was the real Isabella, and she looked ready to conquer anything. Adam was waiting for her at the door, watching with a look of surprise and admiration mixed together. He knew his gamble was paying off, but something in him stirred. He had never imagined that such a simple, natural transformation could have such a big impact. Isabella didn't need expensive clothes or flashy accessories to be noticed. She already had everything she needed, the inner strength and confidence that made her unique. "You look amazing," Adam said, a little surprised at himself for the sincerity. In her words, he hadn't expected her to be so impressive. Isabella looked at him with a subtle smile, but her eyes were shining. "I know that. Now, let's see what you have to show me at your event," she replied, with a touch of irony, but also of expectation. She knew that, with or without the luxuries of the world, she would always have something that no one else could have, her own essence. And that, no matter how much they tried to hide it, was about to shine brighter than anything Adam could imagine. The big day had finally arrived. Evelyn Lopez's wedding was the event of the year, one of the most anticipated moments in local society. The ballroom was decorated with luxury, with imported flowers that perfumed the air and crystals sparkling under the soft lights. Adam Scott, with his imposing suit and his unmistakable millionaire posture, entered with an arrogant smile on his lips. He was there to see what else Evelyn had to offer, but with Isabella by his side, the game was about to change. Isabella, on the other hand, felt like an outsider in this world of ostentation and falsehood. However, she was not intimidated. Her makeover at the beauty salon had left her radiant. She wore a simple but sophisticated dress that hugged her figure elegantly. Her hair, now carefully styled, fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, those deep, intense eyes, were more confident than ever. When she entered the salon, the conversation stopped for a moment. All eyes turned to her, murmurs began, and the scene became charged with expectation. "Who is she?" a woman whispered to her friend, her voice thick with disbelief. Isabella heard but did not care. She was used to being judged. Adam approached confidently, but there was something different in his expression. He couldn't deny that Isabella was mesmerizing. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, trying to hide his nervousness. Isabella looked at him with a subtle smile, but her eyes were focused on Evelyn, who was standing in a corner, receiving greetings from her guests. Evelyn, upon seeing her, paused. The look of contempt and surprise was instantaneous. She knew that this woman was Adam's date, but what was before her eyes was something she could not have foreseen. Isabella was no longer the beggar. She had been before. She was someone who radiated power and self-sufficiency, someone no one could ignore. "So, you finally brought someone who turns heads, huh?" Evelyn said, with a sarcastic smile as she approached Adam and Isabella. She tried to sound polite, but the envy in her eyes was evident. "You really know how to cause a stir." Isabella was undeterred. She crossed her arms and looked at Evelyn, her voice calm but full of intelligence. "You seem impressed, Evelyn. I didn't know you paid so much attention to me." She paused and with a slightly challenging smile added, "But maybe you're more worried about losing your spotlight. It must be hard, right?" The guests around her stopped talking, and a growing tension hung in the air. Evelyn, although she pretended to be calm, could not hide her growing irritation. Never in her life had anyone challenged her like this, so directly and without fear. She tried to smile, but it was a forced smile, and it did not go unnoticed. Adam watched the scene with curiosity, watching the interaction between the two. He began to realize that there was more to Isabella than he had imagined. She was not just a beautiful woman. She possessed something much deeper. She had the ability to impose herself in any environment, to make anyone question their own certainties. She did not need luxury, she simply was. When one of the guests tried to start a conversation with Isabella, she interrupted him with a sharp comment about economics that left everyone around in silence. Economics is not an exact science, it is a human science. People think that stability comes from numbers, but in reality it depends on confidence and smart choices, something that, apparently, is lacking in many of those who occupy these chairs. She subtly pointed to the table where some of the most powerful businessmen were sitting. Adam, who had overheard the conversation, couldn't help but smile inwardly. Isabella had a cutting intelligence, something he was beginning to admire, although he didn't want to admit it. She wasn't there just to be an ornament. She was shaping the room with her presence, her knowledge, and most of all, her audacity. Evelyn, clearly uncomfortable with the way Isabella was publicly challenging her, tried to change the subject, but Isabella's response was immediate and even more incisive. "You know, Evelyn, the difference between the two of us is simple. I don't need the approval of others to feel powerful. You, on the other hand, well, you seem to always be seeking validation." The mood in the room grew more intense. What had started as a light provocation turned into a direct confrontation, and Isabella was gaining ground. As Adam watched, he realized that the woman he had chosen to accompany him was not just out for revenge against his ex. She was something much more dangerous and interesting. Isabella was playing the game in a way no one could have predicted, and little by little she was gaining more than just the attention of those present. She was gaining their respect without asking for anything in return, just by being herself. The event was taking an unexpected turn. The atmosphere that had once been one of celebration and joy was now filled with tension. Isabella, with her unbeatable posture and sharp wit, was becoming the center of attention, and this made Evelyn feel increasingly uncomfortable. Conversations began to turn to her, and even the most powerful guests were starting to look at Isabella with admiration. But it wasn't just what she said, but the way she said it, the confidence that emanated from each word. As the wine flowed, Isabella found herself surrounded by some of the event's biggest businessmen, all trying to understand how a woman who, until just a few hours ago, was on the streets, now exhibited such confidence and mastery over subjects that many of them didn't fully understand. One of the guests, a well-known investor, asked her a direct question. "Do you have any opinion on the current economic situation?" he asked, almost disdaining a woman he had previously thought was a mere companion. Isabella looked at him with an enigmatic smile. "Of course," she replied, "the global economy is at a critical point, not because there is a lack of resources, but because decisions are being made by people who prioritize personal interests over the collective good. This is a reflection of what we call predatory capitalism." She paused, realizing that everyone's eyes were fixed on her. The concentration of wealth in a few hands not only undermines trust in the system, but also puts us all at the mercy of cycles of crisis that could be avoided if we had a more humane approach. Adam, who until then had been observing everything from afar, could not help but be surprised by the clarity and depth of Isabella's answer. He had always known that she was not only beautiful, but that there was something more. She had a sharp mind, who knew how to play with words the same way she played with people. What he had previously thought was a simple pastime now turned out to be a game of chess, where she was definitely years ahead of him. "That's interesting, Isabella," Adam commented, trying to join in the conversation. But the truth was that he was starting to get lost in the whirlwind of ideas she brought to the surface. Isabella smiled slightly, her eyes fixed on the investor, who was still stunned by her explanation. She knew she had captured his attention in a subtle but definitive way. And more than that, she knew that now no one could ignore her anymore. It was at that moment that Evelyn approached with her usual smile, but her eyes were now filled with a hint of disguised contempt. She tried to maintain her posture, but her voice betrayed a certain nervousness. "Do you really think you can talk about economics like that, Isabella? This is a subject for professionals, not for someone like you." Isabella slowly turned to Evelyn, her eyes without rancor, but with a confidence that made anyone back away. "Ah, Evelyn, you still don't get it, do you?" Isabella began with a slight smile on her lips. "You always thought that appearance is what matters, that the glamour of an event like this could hide what is really happening behind the scenes. But you are wrong. I am the kind of person who understands what goes on behind the scenes and, more importantly, understands what really matters." Evelyn, who had not expected this answer, began to sweat. She tried to maintain control of the situation, but Isabella's gaze was relentless. The crowd around them was beginning to notice the power gap between the two women. It was no longer about who was better dressed or who had more social power. It was about who really knew what was going on in the world, who understood the nuances and dynamics that governed this game. Isabella, with impressive calm, continued, now focused directly on Evelyn. "You still don't get it, do you? I'm not a beggar anymore. I don't need your world of appearances and masks. I've seen you from the inside, and I know what's hidden behind the curtains. You live in a house of cards, Evelyn, and one day that house will fall." Those words were like a punch to Evelyn. She tried to maintain her composure, but Isabella's piercing gaze left her speechless. Silence filled the room, and all eyes were now fixed on the scene. Adam, who had been watching everything with growing fascination, tried to intervene, but it seemed that any word he said now would only make the situation worse. "Please, Evelyn, let's try to keep things civil," Adam said, trying to put an end to the public confrontation. But Isabella was no longer interested in keeping up appearances. She wanted to show everyone who really held the power in that environment. "Civilized?" Isabella replied with a low but intense laugh. "What you consider civilized is a dirty game of manipulation. I'm not here to play games, Adam." Evelyn, her pride wounded, walked away quickly, leaving Adam and the other guests with their eyes fixed on Isabella. She had won the game, at least for that moment, and while Adam tried to control the situation, he knew that something had changed irreversibly. Isabella, with her impeccable posture and indestructible confidence, had left a mark on that event, and no one, not even Evelyn, could deny that she had earned the respect of everyone around her. And more importantly, she had left Adam completely intrigued, something he never imagined would happen. After the wedding, marked by so many surprises and tensions, Adam couldn't stop thinking about Isabella. The way she had challenged Evelyn, the knowledge she had demonstrated about economy and etiquette, and the way her confidence had dominated the event. All of this intrigued him more and more. But there was something else, something he couldn't fully understand about her. Over time, Adam's interest in Isabella began to turn into a quiet obsession. He knew she was no ordinary woman, but what made her so different? What was she hiding? Driven by curiosity and a desire to understand more about Isabella's past, Adam decided to investigate her story. He began to search for information about her, discreetly asking his contacts in the city to try to find out something about her true identity. It didn't take long for him to discover something surprising. Isabella was not just any beggar, as he had initially imagined. She was the heiress of one of the richest families in the region, a family that, until recently, was respected and admired by everyone. Isabella's family, the Dukes of Rivera, had a vast fortune, with properties and investments spread across the country. Everything seemed perfect until a series of dishonest betrayals began to crumble the foundation of their wealth. The first major betrayal came from her own partners, who had cheated Isabella's father out of $1 billion deal. But the cruelest of all betrayals came from someone much closer to him, Evelyn. Adam discovered through discreet conversations and old documents that Evelyn, in her youth, had been involved with her family's partners, and it was she who helped plot the scam that bankrupted Isabella's family. Not only did the investments collapse, but all the trust Isabella had placed in the world of people like Evelyn also crumbled. The betrayal was devastating, both financially and emotionally. Now, with this information in hand, Adam felt increasingly uncomfortable with what was happening. Isabella was not just a woman who had been forced to live on the streets by external circumstances. She had chosen this fate. Upon discovering this, Adam decided to confront her, to want to understand more deeply why she had made such a choice. It was not an easy decision to understand. A few days later, he invited Isabella to a quiet meeting at a cafe, away from prying eyes. When she arrived, Adam greeted her with a smile, but his eyes were filled with a rare seriousness. He was determined. "To understand, Isabella, I've learned some things about your past," Adam said hesitantly but directly. "I know about your family, about what happened. I never imagined the story would be so complex." Isabella wasn't surprised. She had expected this to happen, knew he would eventually find out. His eyes were calm, but there was a subtle sadness in his expression. She sighed deeply before she began to speak. "Yes, Adam. My family was destroyed by lies and betrayal. But you need to understand one thing." She paused, searching for the right words. "I grew up in a world of privilege, surrounded by wealth and power. But what I learned through all those betrayals is that those things mean nothing if you can't trust the people around you. I watched my father lose everything, and when he needed support the most, it was my own trust in people that led to his downfall." Adam watched her carefully, feeling the pain in her words, something he never imagined she carried. Isabella continued, her voice firm but with a melancholic lightness. "I chose to live on the streets because I didn't want to be part of that world of deceit anymore. I wanted to be away from the people who destroy others with their selfish ambitions. I preferred the unknown, the cold and lonely streets, to the life of lies and manipulation." She gave a sad but serene smile. "I knew that poverty wouldn't destroy me, but wealth and power, as I saw happen to my family, could kill me inside." Adam was in shock. He had never imagined that Isabella carried such deep pain, such a history of loss and trauma. He felt a mixture of admiration and sadness for her, something he had never experienced for anyone before. She was not a simple beggar he had met by chance. She was a woman of unbreakable strength, someone who had been broken by the world, but who had still stood tall. I didn't know, Isabella. I had no idea, Adam said, his voice low, almost regretful. I thought you were just some random person, someone who was there to help me get revenge. But now I see that there is so much more to you than I ever imagined. Isabella looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and understanding. I'm not a victim, Adam. I made my choices. Now I live with them and they've made me who I am. But I don't let my past define me. I move forward, always. Adam was silent, absorbing her words. He knew that Isabella's story was more complex and painful than he could have imagined, and that made him see her with new eyes. What he felt for her was no longer just curiosity or fascination. It was something deeper, something he didn't yet know how to define, but that made him want to be by her side, to understand the woman she really was. Time passed quickly, and soon rumors that Isabella was present in high society began to spread. Her past as a beggar had become a scandal, but at the same time, she was beginning to attract attention in an unusual and unexpected way. However, no one was more bothered by this than Evelyn. She didn't like being challenged, much less by someone like Isabella. And as a woman with a huge ego and a need to maintain her impeccable image, Evelyn would not miss the opportunity to try to humiliate Isabella publicly. It was at a large charity event, held in a luxurious mansion, that the humiliation took place. The event brought together many important figures from society, influential and powerful people. When Isabella entered, elegantly dressed and with her confident posture, she was the star of the night. But it wasn't long before Evelyn, disguised as a friend and hiding a gentle smile, decided to deliver the final blow. She stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, and in a voice that seemed sweet but full of malice, announced, "And now, my friends, I would like to share something very peculiar, a little memory of our friend Isabella so that everyone can see where she came from." Evelyn, with a victorious smile, gestured to a screen behind her. The lights went out and a series of photos appeared on the screen. They were old photos of Isabella, taken while she was wandering the streets, dirty and destitute, the images displayed as a form of mockery. The room fell silent. Some people looked at the images with surprise, others with disdain, as if they had expected this. Evelyn then looked at Isabella with a triumphant smile, her eyes shining with satisfaction as she saw the discomfort in Isabella's expression. "It's funny how things can change, isn't it, Isabella? A woman from the streets now circulating among the rich and powerful," she said, her voice full of venom. Isabella remained calm, but her heart was heavy. The public humiliation was clear, but she would not let Evelyn have the last word. She knew that people were waiting to see how she would react, and contrary to what Evelyn imagined, Isabella did not flinch. She stared at the screen, looking at the photos of her past, but it was not with sadness that she saw them. It was with a calm smile, an attitude of someone who no longer cared about the shame they were trying to impose on her. Adam, who was in a corner of the room, watched everything in silence, but felt a wave of anger rise within him. He knew that Evelyn was trying to crush Isabella, but what she didn't know was that Isabella was no longer the fragile woman Evelyn imagined. She had overcome much more than any old image could represent. When Evelyn finished her attempt at humiliation, Adam stood up from his seat. He was already prepared to intervene. He didn't want to see Isabella being treated with disdain anymore. Without hesitation, he walked to the stage, his steps firm and determined, and took the microphone from Evelyn's hands. "What you just did is a disgrace, Evelyn," Adam said, his voice echoing throughout the room. The people around him began to whisper, surprised by his boldness. Evelyn, who was already preparing to respond, was left open-mouthed by his attitude. He turned to the audience and, with unexpected firmness, continued, "Isabella has nothing to do with what they're trying to make of her. She's a woman with a story I know all too well, and the only thing she deserves here is respect." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Adam, who was speaking with a conviction few knew. He looked directly at Evelyn, his gaze hard, fearless. "I'm here to support Isabella, and nothing you do or say will change that. She deserves to be here as much as any of us. And the fact that you think you can humiliate her makes me ashamed that I ever crossed your path." The shock on Evelyn's face was visible. She didn't know how to react, how to respond to such a direct and public accusation. She tried to smile, but it was a forced, uncomfortable smile. What she didn't expect was that the game had changed. Isabella was no longer alone, and now she had someone who was willing to defend her, someone who truly understood her. Isabella, from across the room, watched the scene with shining eyes. She never imagined that Adam, the man who had hired her to be his escort, would stand up so bravely to defend her. She felt a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that she was beginning to recognize as affection, something she had never thought she would feel for anyone again. Adam's words, his unconditional support, completely changed the dynamics of the room. People began to murmur, some recognizing his courage, others admiring Isabella's firm stance. Evelyn, as much as she tried to maintain the facade of an unbeatable lady, now seemed weakened. Her arrogance was being exposed, and the humiliation she was trying to inflict on Isabella was turning against her. Time passed, and the days of Adam and Isabella's coexistence began to show a new dynamic. Those moments when Adam saw her as a challenge for his revenge were now transforming into something completely different. With every conversation, with every look, he noticed how much Isabella was more than a mysterious woman, full of sarcasm and self-confidence. She was complex, with a depth that he could not fully understand. And over time, Adam realized that something was growing inside him, something he could no longer ignore. Isabella, in turn, also felt a change. The woman she had been before, the one who distrusted everyone around her, was beginning to make room for another version of herself. She began to see Adam with different eyes. At first, she thought it was all just a whim of his, something fleeting, a game. But over time, she saw that he was willing to go above and beyond what anyone else had ever done for her. He was there for her, genuinely, not just as someone who wanted to impress, but as someone who cared about her well-being. One cold night, as they sat in the garden of Adam's house, their conversation took an unexpected turn. The soft moonlight illuminated them both, creating a perfect setting, but it was the tension between them that made that moment even more special. Isabella looked at Adam, hesitating for a moment. He was closer than she had imagined, and her heart was beating faster than she would like to admit. "You know, Adam, I'm not easy to deal with," Isabella said, trying to break the silence, her sarcastic tone still present. "I'm not like the women you're used to." Adam smiled slightly, but his gaze was serious, and he responded with a softness she hadn't expected. "I know that. And honestly, that's one of the things that attracts me most to you. I don't need you to be like everyone else, Isabella. I just need you to be you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's a dangerous idea, Adam. I'm not someone you should get involved with." Adam leaned a little closer, his gaze fixed on hers. "I know you're afraid to trust people, but it's not about trusting others anymore. It's about trusting yourself. You've come a long way. Isabella, you've overcome so much, and He hesitated for a moment before continuing, his voice softer. I think I'm starting to fall in love with you." Those words hung in the air between them. Isabella felt a rush of heat, a mix of surprise and excitement. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to keep up the impenetrable facade, but in that moment something inside her gave way. She had always known that the heart could be treacherous, that trust was a hard thing to earn, but she also knew that somehow it was real. She looked him in the eye, and for the first time, without her usual sarcasm, she answered, "Adam, I don't know what to do with this. I never imagined someone like you." He interrupted her, touching her hand gently. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this. I'm not asking you to love me right now. I just want you to know that I'm here, and that I want to know the real you, not because of who you were or where you came from, but because of who you are now." Isabella was silent for a moment, the vision of the life she had lived mixing with, the reality of what she was experiencing with him. She had always kept her distance, resistant to any kind of feeling, but in that moment, the barrier she had fought so hard to maintain seemed to begin to crumble. "I never thought anyone would understand me this way," she said, her voice low but full of meaning. "I spent so much time trying to survive that I forgot to live. Now here you are, and you're saying all this." Adam held her hand tighter, a sense of complicity between them beginning to grow. "I'm not perfect, and I know that what happened in the past can't be erased. But if you let me, I want to help you build something new, something real." Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the sincerity in his words. When she opened them again, she found in his eyes the promise of something more, of a future she had never imagined possible. And finally, she allowed herself to smile, no longer with distrust, but with genuine kindness. "Maybe, just maybe, I can give you a chance," she said, her voice now softer, but still full of strength. "Not just for love, but for a new life." The silence that followed between them was comfortable, as if everything around them had disappeared, and the only moment that mattered was this one. It was the beginning of something new, a genuine relationship, built not on interests or games, but on trust and respect. From that moment on, Adam and Isabella were no longer two people living in separate worlds. They were beginning to build a story together, a chapter of their lives that would undoubtedly change everything they believed about love and about themselves. Isabella was sitting on the porch of her new home with a cup of hot tea in her hands, looking out at the peaceful view of the city. Life with Adam was shaping up in a way she never imagined possible. Each day felt like a new discovery, a new chance to start over, and she was allowing herself to live the way she had always dreamed of, but never had the courage to pursue. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. She looked at the screen and saw the name of Sophia, her old friend and for some time her mentor in the business world. Isabella hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hi, Isabella. I have a job offer for you. A big project in another city. I know you're well established here with Adam, but this could be your chance to get your career back on track. I need you, Isabella. This project is important, and they specifically asked for you." Sophia's words hit her like a bolt from the blue. The offer was tempting. A job in another city, where she would have the opportunity to start over professionally, put into practice everything she had learned, and finally leave the past behind. What more could she want? The offer was a chance to rebuild her career and live up to her ambitions. The problem, however, was that she already had something she hadn't expected. A true love with Adam, something she never imagined possible. She looked out at the city, thoughtful, but she knew that Adam was in the house, waiting for her. They had overcome so much together, and he had been a fundamental part of this new phase of her life. Isabella wondered if it was fair to leave him behind for a job, when all she really wanted was to be by his side to build a life together. Adam entered the porch, interrupting her thoughts. He sat down next to her, noticing that she was in a state of confusion. "Is everything okay, Isabella?" he asked, his voice soft, as if he knew something was bothering her. She sighed deeply, looking at him with eyes full of indecision. "Adam, I got a job offer, a great opportunity in another city. It's the kind of thing I've always dreamed of, but—" She hesitated, trying to put into words what she was feeling. "But I don't know what to do. I thought I would be in a place where I could choose my career, but now I don't want to leave you behind. I've had so much time where I felt alone, Adam. I finally found something that makes me happy." "You make me happy." Adam looked at her, his eyes full of understanding and tenderness. He knew how much Isabella had fought to get here. He also knew how much that job meant to her, but something inside him didn't want to see her go. He held her hand with a gentle smile. "Isabella, you deserve to achieve everything you've ever dreamed of. But I also know how much love has been an important part of this new life for you. You don't have to make this choice alone." She looked at him, touching his hand, feeling the sincerity in his words. "I don't know what's more important, Adam, my job or what we've built here. I don't want to lose you, but I also can't ignore this opportunity." Adam took a deep breath, thinking about everything she'd said. "I'm not going to ask you to give up on your dreams, Isabella. But what I want you to know is that by my side, you can have both. The job you want, the career you desire, and still have someone who truly loves you. No matter where life takes you, I'll be here, but the decision needs to be yours." The silence took over for a moment. Isabella looked at him, feeling the weight of the decision. Everything in her life up until then had been about survival, about making the right choices to move forward. But now she was faced with a decision that wasn't just about her professional future, but also about her emotional future. She loved Adam. He had been her rock, her safe haven. She couldn't ignore what they had built together. Finally, she looked into his eyes and spoke with a certainty that only love could bring. I refuse. I choose to stay. I want to continue by your side. Work can wait." I finally understood that love is what makes life meaningful. And it is with you that I want to build my future. Adam smiled, a smile full of relief and happiness. He hugged her tightly, as if he feared losing her. But at the same time, he knew that Isabella's decision was what would make everything more meaningful. They were ready to continue their life together, side by side, as they were always meant to be. "I love you, Isabella," he whispered in her ear. She smiled, feeling a peace she never imagined possible. "I love you too, Adam. And now our future will be written together." And with that, she made the choice that would define the rest of her life. She prioritized love, not just hers, but theirs. And in doing so, she found true happiness with the man who helped her rediscover who she truly was. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. The sun was beginning to set, dyeing the sky in golden and orange hues, while the soft sound of the waves crashing on the shore filled the air. The setting was perfect, the calm of the sea, the soft light of the evening, and the salty smell of the sea breeze. Adam and Isabella stood there side by the sea, as if the world had disappeared around them. Adam held Isabella's hand tenderly, his gaze fixed on her, as if he wanted to engrave that moment in his memory forever. He had planned everything meticulously, and now in front of her his heart was beating fast, full of emotion and hope for the future. "Isabella, you have given me so much. You have given me love, patience, and a new outlook on life. By your side, I have learned the true meaning of being happy, of being whole. And today, I want to give you something that shows how much I love you and how ready I am to be by your side forever," he said, his voice thick with emotion but firm. Isabella looked at him tenderly, feeling a wave of happiness and gratitude flood her chest. Everything she had experienced had led her to this point. She remembered her days on the streets, the despair and loneliness. She remembered when she didn't believe she deserved such pure and genuine love. But there, in that perfect setting, with the man who had helped her rebuild her life, she knew that things had changed forever. Adam then knelt before her, taking a small box from his suit pocket, his eyes shining. "Isabella Lopez, will you accept to be my wife? Will you accept to be part of my life forever, as I am part of yours?" His words were like a promise sealed with the gentle wind that passed. Isabella looked at him, feeling the weight and beauty of the moment. She felt the love overflowing within her, and his gesture of kneeling symbolized the depth of his commitment. It was something she never imagined she would experience, and now, more than ever, she knew she had found the place where they belonged. "Yes, Adam," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "I accept being your wife. I accept living this love with you, because by your side I have found the strength and peace I have always sought. Yes, I love you." Adam smiled, a smile that could light up the entire world, and placed the ring on her finger, sealing the commitment. They stood up and embraced, the wind from the sea blowing their hair, and the sound of the waves seemed to celebrate this moment. With them, it was a love that had withstood time and hardship, that had overcome all barriers and was now ready to blossom fully. But before they could part, Isabella looked at Adam, a mischievous smile on her lips. "I have a surprise for you, too," she said, and her voice was full of an important revelation. Adam looked at her, curious, with a half-intrigued smile. "What is it, Isabella? You've surprised me in so many ways." She looked at him with shining eyes and with a sweet lightness said, "Adam, I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world seemed to stop again. Adam was speechless, his mind processing the news. What he felt in that moment was a happiness so pure that it seemed impossible to express. The smile spread across his face, and he pulled her close, as if he feared she might disappear. You're pregnant?" he asked, his voice barely audible, as a laugh of happiness escaped his lips. This is the best gift I could receive." Isabella smiled, seeing the expression of surprise and happiness in Adam's eyes. "Yes, Adam, we're creating a family, our family, and I'm so happy that you're the father of our child." In an impulsive gesture, Adam hugged her tightly, happiness overflowing. They were creating something new, something that, despite all the difficulties of the past, was now blossoming in a grand way. The promise of a future together, the promise of a love that would expand even further with the arrival of a child. The wedding took place in a simple ceremony, but of indescribable beauty. They were surrounded by the people they loved most, on a beach where the gentle wind and the sound of the sea created the perfect soundtrack for that special day. It was as if the entire universe was celebrating their love, celebrating the construction of the new family they were forming. Adam looked at Isabella during the ceremony, his eyes filled with tears of happiness. "The two of us, together, always." Isabella smiled and squeezed his hand. "Always, Adam, forever." And there, by the sea, under the soft light of the sunset, the couple sealed their destiny, not only with a ring, but with the promise of an eternal love, which would now also be shared with the life that was about to begin. The future was before them, full of hope and new opportunities. They had overcome so much together, and now they knew that the best was yet to come. If this moving story touched your heart, be sure to share it with your friends and family to spread even more love and inspiration. And of course, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any stories that will stir your emotions. Click the bell to receive notifications and be the first to watch. Together, let's build a community of people who believe in the power of love and overcoming. Share now and be part of this journey.